if it's going, and we certainly, if this thing flies, we certainly would hope it's going and operating successfully. You want to look at what are the worst case scenarios at that particular time. What is the influence on the neighborhood at that point? Not necessarily on opening week when there's not enough cars there to really count or to do anything because nobody knows you're in there yet. So we've got somewhere in the 500 to 750 cars at a time. I know there was a comparison. I think Jim Addington made it with Nature's Best. I've always felt that parking lot is not big enough for that business. So I think there's a perceived much higher level of congestion and turnover because you have to wait sometimes for a spot there. Now, these guys, it was not brought up either. We've talked about the 170 parking spots, but even with all of this property and the size of the building, and Shannon, please correct me, or Fred if I'm wrong, but I believe the number you guys have calculated for us in our package is 148 parking spots, right, is the required number of spots for customers and for employees. So they have tried to meet and exceed this. Now there's only a few ways you can do that. You got to go underground, overground, or extend the property. Now you could argue and say you could also make the building smaller, therefore needing less cars and having more space to develop for parking. That's probably not realistic in terms of what they're trying to do as far as the building is concerned. Over and under are quite costly, as you can guess, but we'll come back to that in a minute. I just wanted to point out that 148 is the number if you want to have a strict interpretation of the code that's required by the code. When you look at the number of cars and the street options, there's no question that there's going to be an impact on the neighborhood. Is it going to be 2012 with doom and gloom and the end of the world? Probably not that bad. Is it going to be somewhat substantial? I think you're going to certainly see more. There's no question. You can't put this many cars in there and not see traffic on all the streets around there. And I think some of it's going to go out to Ogden. I don't think everybody's going to run down to Chicago Avenue. There's going to be some cars that are going to go up and utilize Ogden, either off of Richmond, probably more to go east, and off of Blackhawk, probably more to go west. But I think you're going to have some of that. And then finally, finally, as far as just a little shopping cleaning list, I was thinking the same thing that Commissioner Anton was thinking, that if you were doing something like this, you would want to have the employees at the southernmost spot because there'd be the least turnover and the least milling around and stuff like that. And that might also be an opportunity to close that one exit right there. I'm not sure why you felt the need for two on Richmond. And certainly you could address and explain that if you would like. Anyway, those were just some of the little business points that I wanted to bring up. Now, as far as the project as a whole, I think this is a good project on the surface. As you dig into it and you look at the various comments that we've got, this is an intrusion into an otherwise residential neighborhood. And it comes in fairly deep, particularly on the Richmond side. And I don't see a solution for a couple of things. The gentleman who lives at 514, in the present layout, you almost have to have a Blackhawk exit. I don't see how else you can do it because there's no other way unless you're aimed at his front door. And that's not a good thing for that one particular guy. And I know that sometimes you say, well, you've got one person, do you sacrifice a project? Then, you get into that whole O'Hare Airport thing and stuff like that. Where do you draw the line and stuff? I just want to bring that up and start the discussion on it. I'm less concerned about the other side because I think it's a natural to match up an exit with a street. No one brought that up, and I think that's better than having it aimed at some guy's front door. That's just my personal opinion. So lined up with the street would be better than offset either north or south, because then it would be lined up with one of the houses. So, and I don't think people are going to go into a dead end. I mean, they're going to exit, but they're going to turn left or right. And because it's a street, that's where the headlights would line up in the headlight type of season and time of day. That seems to be reasonable as far as I'm concerned. 22 feet is difficult for me to swallow at the back end. And I think that's a tough, that's not even 10 yards in a football game. Now, I think there's some ways that you could do a lot with that. I mean, you've got a natural slope. You could play that into a large berm. You could go and certainly get a bigger fence. I would think you could go up to 6 foot on a commercial. 7. I was going to say, I knew for 8 you were going to need a variance. So it sounds like 7 is okay. But you start to put a 5 to 6 foot berm, a 7 foot fence, and I will, again, a lot of agreeing with Commissioner Anton. Your landscaping plan, and folks, I don't know if you've had a chance to see it. Now, even when it flashed through on the screen, you really don't get the true beauty of it. These guys have put into 6 figures in the landscaping, which in 4 acres you would expect that, but there's things above and beyond. I was here for the Jewel presentation when they remodeled it, and we didn't see nearly any of that kind of stuff. So you can deaden the sound, and you can also try to keep your neighborhood so that you protect that view. I think it was the young lady who was having the bonfires out in the back. I'm looking for an invite on one of those. And she was...
Fridays and Saturday nights, we've got the swimming pool.
There you go. Well, she would say that, when
And with your permission, hopefully we'll have a deck.
when you look to the north, you see sort of woods and trees and not a lot of lights and stuff. And I think you can create that. I think that can be created with berms, fences, and mature landscaping and light screening and the proper use of lights. Those back rows would, I think, absolutely be shut off at nighttime. Those aren't going to be necessary. So I think there's a mixture of things you can do there. But there's no way to get around coming out onto Blackhawk. Now, one possible solution is to trade, and that's to trade 514 Richmond for the auto body shop on Blackhawk, and perhaps you've tried that. I'm not privy to that. But that's already zoned the way you want it. And that increases and shifts your exit to the north. And it allows that area to be closed off and landscaped and tightened up a lot if you sort of Z it a little bit to come north on that. Just an idea. And again, you may say, hey, we offered the guy $10 million. He said he's not selling. I don't know. Maybe you didn't think of it. Maybe you guys are pretty sharp, so you probably did. But just another option. The other thing is that I've always felt that there's times where you reach an impasse where you can't negotiate any further. I still think there's some give and take in here between you guys and the neighbors. And I would encourage you guys to have another meeting, well published, even finding a block captain or two whose responsibility it is to get the word out and say, hey, we'll meet at the library or something like that and talk about some of the things that you guys can do and take a look at what can be done with the possibility of coupling berms with fences with the landscaping that you've got, and then probably that would shift a little of the landscaping when you do that. But I think those are some of the things. There's a lot of good things in here. The traffic, the egress out onto Blackhawk in particular, and the 22 feet are the 3 I see. The stormwater, the store, the sales tax, the jobs, the property taxes, those are all solid things, I think. I think the stormwater detention will actually help that whole area. That's what we've seen in the past when it's been engineered, and I would agree with that. Those are my comments.
Mr. Thomas?
I enjoy being last sometimes because it's been covered. I had questions about how many spots you would lose if you gave up that last house going south. Would you still be under the minimum? I don't know. The employee parking in south is normal business, get them out of the way, further away, so your people are up close. And I think the block party or captains or however you get everybody together to talk about your problems is a good idea, because this is doable. This is definitely doable, I believe, and it's going to be good for everybody concerned. That's all I have.
Okay, last but not least. Again, your hours of operation.
7, 8, and 9 feet.
I'm sorry?
7, 8, and 9 feet.
Okay. For the traffic study, gentlemen, your Blackhawk, your northbound traffic, how many turn eastbound onto Ogden Avenue? I would just wonder how some people would be sitting in line on Blackhawk Avenue and take a shortcut through the parking lot to get to Richmond, and then cut north on Richmond and make their right turn going eastbound on Ogden. People are going to learn how to do a shortcut.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, your question was how many people do we expect to make a left onto Ogden?
No, to make an eastbound turn on Ogden. Northbound Blackhawk to eastbound Ogden.
Almost none. Well, I would expect that if you're going to go that way, why would you wait at the light? If you can go to Richmond and make the turn, the light at Blackhawk gives you breaks in that eastbound traffic.
Okay, that makes sense. It was just a question. Again, we were talking as to you're required to have 148 parking spaces. You proposed 169. Now that home, the red brick home which is on lot 15 that you're going to demolish, and you were going to propose a 22-foot buffer. You also have your 21 parking spaces over. Also, your southernmost row of parking is 21 spaces. If you were to eliminate that, put a fence there, now you would have 40 foot of a buffer that you could work with to the homes to the south of you. You could also eliminate that southernmost curb cut on Richmond. And most of your traffic could work with that northbound curb cut.
If we did that?
Please,
If we were to eliminate that parcel from the assemblage, it wouldn't.
not eliminate the parcel, keep the parcel, because you would need some of it for the turning radius for these, your southernmost parking space. But you would just get rid of the 21 parking spaces and create a 40-foot buffer. So you would be using 2/3 of that parcel as buffer, and
You've got 22 feet, the spot is 18, so that gives you 40 feet.
that gives
then.
you 40 feet.
That's what he's referring to.
That's what I'm referring to.
Yep, okay.
So you would be able to work with a much more desirable buffer. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do.
It's just a thought. As per snow storage, one thing on your landscaping plan, one little aside, I guess, if you would, you're gonna be planting some trees in front of your little basin, your stormwater basin, your detention. Be a spot if you were to drop those few trees or bushes or whatever, you could fill that thing up with snow. Give you a place to put it. Pretty much everybody else has gone through everything else all over again, and the signs I really don't have a problem with. The number of signs, you're below the square footage that you could normally get. You realize if you go with one of these electronic signs, we do have ordinances that cover what they can do, is how bright they can be, the colors, et cetera, et cetera.
How frequency they change.
All my fellow commissioners have pretty well covered everything else. So, anybody got anything further to say?
May I add one point?
Please, Shannon.
Staff anticipated the direction of some of this conversation this evening and did discuss the possibility that the closure, or not including that southern ingress and egress along the Richmond side, may come up. And for that reason, the Public Works Director and the Fire Prevention Bureau Director and I reviewed that matter, and neither one of those entities has an issue with closing that access for public safety or public works reasons.
Okay.
Can I ask a question on this? I mean,
No, I've closed the count.
we're just getting started. As we look at this and we look at these options, if there's changes that can be worked out by the groups, I mean, one of the options is for us to vote on this now, up or down. And another thing is to also see if anybody wants, if they want to have any more development, and that would be something that they should address perhaps right now if they want to think about any of the things that have come out. I don't know if some of this stuff is new to you guys, if it's stuff that you've heard already from everybody, if you've got any other ideas, if there was any other options as far as meeting with the public at all. I don't know if that's anything that even interests you, or if there's, if this is about as far as you can go, but you might want to address some of the different concepts or some of the thoughts that we've had from the collective group here. I think it would be, I would like to know sort of like what you're thinking. Is this it? Is this what we're locked in? Or are you open to some agreement and talk on some of these things?
We all have coffee and we'll come too.
Well, as we said earlier, and I appreciate everybody being here this late, and, you know, we're new at this, so that really, truly have never done anything like this, and not finding it as pleasant as, to be honest with you. But I think that our timeline is important to us, and our relationship with the neighbors is important to us. So I hesitate to recommend a course of action if it's going to cause delay. At the same time, love to parallel path, you know, a process where we can, you know, find a place where everybody's smiling, or at least everybody's satisfied. I think, you know, to give any specific response at the moment would be difficult. We would have to go back with some of the recommendations and really see the feasibility, look at the cost impact and such like that. But I guess I'm just telling you what's going around in my mind. So that's, you know, certainly not it's our way or the highway attitude, of course, but those are the concerns.
Commissioner Pill? Basically, I don't think we would have any trouble voting on a conceptual project, and hopefully they could have some of these concerns that the neighbors have got, that we've raised, and this could be adjusted at the Board of Trustees.
That's another way to do it. I would certainly.
And that way it shouldn't impact their timeline too greatly. Shannon, how long would, if tonight, when would they go before the Committee of the Whole?
If there hadn't been issues to work through, we'd probably be able to schedule them for the 28th of this month. If there are some issues to be worked through between meetings, more realistically, it would probably be the 11th.
That would probably
11th
still
of
fit.
November.
Right, about a 2-week
Still
delay.
fit within your time frame without holding you back too much?
I would just like some assurances that I think a localized meeting, we've seen this before, and 9 out of 10 times there's been I'm not going to say 100% agreement, but there's been at least some kind of a consensus reached. And I think you guys want that too, because I think you'd like to be able to turn around and count on these people as being your customers in the future also. And I think that's important. One of the things I like about this project is that, having been on the planning and zoning for the number of years that I've seen some projects that aren't so good. And I'm not saying that something else is going to come along and end up there that's not going to be good, but this project, except for this incursion, has many, many positives and many benefits to it. I think even several of the presenters tonight raised those comments. So there are other things. We had an example of one tonight that didn't seem to be something we would want to see. And there were no variances or any of that kind of stuff, but it was just something that just didn't fit into what we're looking to do. This is an upscale, and it's a nice-looking building, and there's been considerable thought, and there's a large investment here. I don't have a problem with the concept and looking at it that way. I would just hope that you would take my comments to heart, and that I know Jim Addington would love to volunteer. He doesn't volunteer enough. He would raise his hand and certainly be a block captain right there and try to get some of these people. There it is, right there. And I'm sure we could find a place, and that's a great way to do it, to try to get some ideas out.
And we'd be happy to help.
You are our board, though. We're relying on you. You heard our issues, so you're
Absolutely.
professionals.
Absolutely.
You're here for us.
Yep.
How would you feel if the suggestion I had about dropping those 21 parking spaces at the southernmost end of your parking lot, closing off that southern entrance onto Richmond?
We have to study that. That would be a significant decrease in parking, so we have to study.
It's 21, and you're how many over?
You're 21 over as it is.
A lot of those spaces, wherever they will be for employees, so that's 21 less spaces that people could shop in the store. So that would take us from 149 spaces per shoppers to 129 spaces per shoppers.
But what I hear, maybe I'm trying to understand what you're asking. I mean, I understand the question. We talked about it, or I addressed it a little bit. I'm just trying to really understand what's behind the question.
It would increase your buffer
Right.
on your southern from 22 feet to 40 feet,
Right.
which would give you significantly more of a buffer and perhaps alleviate some of the concerns about the people looking into the parking lot. It was a thought. Yes, ma'am. If-
Comments closed.
You got to come up here and speak, otherwise.
I know a number of municipalities are now having businesses share parking lots, so less property is under pavement. Are there any other businesses nearby where the employees could park? And the place I'm thinking of very close to, but it is a different town, is literally across the street from you on Richmond. There's a restaurant that's open only in later hours of the day. Certainly plenty of parking for employees there, if they could work out that deal. Just a thought.
Well,
It's a good thought, and there is some consideration and I guess it's partly why I'm hesitating. And we believe employee off-site parking is an option. Unfortunately, you can't park them. I mean, we're not talking about like shuttle buses. We're hoping something would be close, and so it does create some limitations. But it's something that's actually already actively being looked at. So it's a good idea.
Well, that one parking lot is literally about 40 feet from
Yeah.
it.
I like her. She's the answer lady.
Any further yes, Jim, please.
You can time me if you want. I know a lot of the Lions.
I got the 3-minute button going.
The only question, or the only thing that I want to say is, and this goes back to the last comment I made before I sat down, you're our last line of defense. If you take the suggestion that your chairman made, it means what you've done is you've passed the buck to the village board. Right now, you've heard from a lot of people from this area. Several of you have expressed concerns with some of the issues that came up. I think this motion should be tabled. Let them come back to us, get us on the right side, and then this thing flies. If we can work something out. If you just say, oh, well, work something out between the time we say yes, the village board doesn't have to listen at that point. You've already given them a motion to recommend. And that takes one of our defenses away from us. So don't do that to us as your friends and neighbors, please. And I think that's very important.
Chairman, I'd like to respond to Mr. Addington's comment, but that would be done given the fact that a significant compromise would have already been made that's a movement towards what these residents have requested. I think the developers have indicated they're willing to give a little bit. We'd ask some giving on the part of the residents now. We think this is an excellent project. We'd like to see it happen. I'd like to see some movement from both sides that would try to facilitate the current timeline that the developers have requested.
What if we were to schedule a special meeting? Board members, you want to vote on this, up, down, special meeting?
We were going to go to her house
Cheers.
for a special meeting.
They shut down the pool already.
You got firewood, right?
You can come too.
What are your thoughts on this?
The special meeting is for what?
To give them 2 to 3 weeks with which to have a meeting, come to a consensus, come back to us?
It would just be, yeah, it could speed things along, and it would just be a continuation of the public hearing until that special.
So we don't have to republish, we don't have to worry about those kind of guidelines and stuff like that, we would be okay?
Right. The other alternative would be waiting until second Wednesday in November, when we normally meet.
Sounds good.
I don't have a problem with a special meeting.
Fred, from a staff standpoint, are there any problems with that?
We'll agree to do whatever background work is necessary for the commission's benefit.
And John, there's no legal issues with that then, as far as you already addressed publishing, and there's no other, because it's a continuation then, you're saying, right?
Right, don't have to republish, just have to post notice, post the agenda that there's a special meeting, but you don't have to publish in the newspaper. The only issue that I don't know that we can answer tonight, unfortunately, is availability of this board meeting room. The school district still uses it.
Yes.
On certain nights. The village board has their meetings. I don't know if anyone knows the schedule offhand. Because if we do continue it, we have to continue it to a specific date tonight. So that might be a little difficult to do.
Mr. Priest, what are your thoughts on this?
The continuance of fine, tell us the date.
Well, all the meetings, I believe, except the school board, are on the village calendar.
Fire station, not fire
And the school board, I think, is on Tuesday.
We could always use Station 3.
You did it 2 weeks.
I was going to say, fire trucks. I like fire trucks. Let's go to the station.
If you did it 2 weeks from tonight,
You just don't want to be here.
That's right. Past my bedtime.
Still got another item to go.
I know.
That's the 27th. There's no scheduled meeting. It says Chamber of Commerce on the calendar on October 27th, but I don't think that's a
it's
meeting
an
here.
afternoon board meeting at 11:30 a.m. for pizza, and then the meeting's at noon.
Okay. So 27th is available if 2 weeks is enough to have residents and the applicant meet.
And what's the next Wednesday then? Would be the third?
We meet the Wednesday.
Westmont Special Events Board. Fred, that doesn't use this?
I don't think they use the village board room.
Meet at the Westmont Center, I think.
Yeah, so it'd be free on the 3rd also.
So that's 2 and 3 weeks respectively.
I think at that point, we'd still be scheduling for the 11th, just to keep in mind for the committee of the whole.
So they wouldn't lose any time at all going before the committee of the whole.
Fred, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think
I
we'd
believe that's
still be on
correct.
track for that same date.
Personally, I think we would be better off giving it to the 3rd so that there would be ample time for these guys to think a little bit, for the newly elected block captains to get the group together to find a spot and maybe have a little talk.
We're all open to talk.
The third,
Oh, yeah, we should ask you guys too.
we would meet on the 3rd instead of the 27th and still keep the 11th time.
Yeah.
Correct.
Shannon confirmed both of those would work. I thought it'd be better to have more time to give.
That'll give you 3 weeks with which to meet your neighbors, your new neighbors, and your future customers.
And us too.
Okay, let's,
All right, I would entertain a motion to table this until November the 3rd
At 7 PM.
at 7 PM.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Pill, seconded by Commissioner Fleet. Question on the motion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Pill,
Yes.
Commissioner Anton,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Fleet,
Yes.
Commissioner Fidesco.
Yes.
And Chairman Richard.
Yes.
The minutes should reflect.
Guys, before everybody runs out, a couple of you guys get together here and get some phone numbers. Okay.
And although the public hearing was closed, the purpose of this tabling is to continue the public hearing and reopen it. So I assume resident comment will be allowed again?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, guys, I got a question. If you guys go ahead and approve this, let's just say you approve it, what options do we have as citizens of Westmont to challenge you and still stop it? I mean, is there any options left after you recommend?
Committee as a whole.
Yeah, it goes
Committee of the whole.
Yeah, we're not legislators.
No, you're recommending it.
Right.
What do we do after this? If you guys
You go
say
to
yes, go with it, then what
the
do we
committee of the whole meeting.
Then it's the elected officials and you can appear there.
Yes, and you can sign up
We're trying
to speak.
We'd like to see you guys have agreement before it gets to that.
Yeah, I agree, but I just wondered what, I've never been here before, so I don't know what the next step is, and that's what I was curious.
That's where it goes then, yep. Yeah, right.
I don't want to say we lost control of it, but we lost control of it.
Next item on the agenda, Planning and Zoning Item 10-032. Village of Westmont regarding a zoning code text amendment as follows. A, amend Appendix A, Section 6.04, Paragraph D of the Westmont zoning code to reduce maximum allowable lot coverage from 40% to 35% in all single-family zoning districts. Staff?
Thank you. The commission will recall last year, I believe it was November, the village board commissioned Christopher Berg Engineering to do a village-wide stormwater study. We're in the process of finalizing the results of that study, and as part of that, just in general, lot coverage has been a point of discussion. This has gone back probably 12 to 24 months, I would say, just as a possible solution for some of the stormwater problems that have been experienced within the village, as well as addressing the bulk standards, bulk regulations, the size and massing of homes within the village. The request that's before you this evening, there was a staff direction at the Building and Zoning Committee of the Board on September 7th. At that time, the committee asked staff to present this text amendment, which would reduce lot coverage in all single-family districts. So that's R1 through R4, R3, from 40% to 35%. So currently, there's not a lot coverage requirement in the R4 and R5 multifamily districts. As part of this ordinance, that wouldn't change. This would just be for the single-family districts. And to give you an idea of what that means, most of the single-family lots in the village of Westmont are considered R3 zoning. That has a minimum lot size of 7,800 square feet. So those are the typical lot sizes you see right in the central area of town, the original subdivision from 1921. So all around Village Hall here, those are examples of like 60 by 125 size lots. In the case of our zoning ordinance as it stands today with a lot size of 7,800 square feet, you'd be permitted to build up to a lot coverage of 3,120 square feet. If it's reduced to 35%, that would be 2,730 square feet. That would be somewhat comparable to surrounding communities such as Clarendon Hills, Downers Grove, and Lisle. Fred, do you have any points to add?
Just that this is the specific direction of the village board. They wish to move in this direction, and the correct protocol is to take that first to the Planning and Zoning Commission before moving to the village board. We feel in light of the severe stormwater flooding issues that the village has faced over the past 2 to 3 years, this is a necessary step in concert with the village-wide stormwater study that has been commissioned. It will make it difficult on some single-family homeowners to make any additions to their property. If you're already over the allowable lot coverage, you may have a legal non-conforming situation. So if you want to add a patio or a deck, the answer may have to be no. But we have to take extraordinary measures in times when we have severe flooding issues throughout various parts of the village. Just in a general sense, many landlocked suburban Chicago communities are facing these same problems. We've continued to build out and build out. There's fewer and fewer acres of green space within our communities. People want to improve their property. We want to help them improve their property, but eventually things start to give. We've seen an excessive amount of precipitation on an annual basis compared to the last 10 to 15 years. I think the village manager prepared a recent annual precipitation chart showing in, I think it was about 1996, we experienced just over 15.5 inches of annual precipitation in the village of Westmont, and we're up over something like 32 inches in 2008.
33 at the sanitary district.
An infrastructure which maybe was adequate to handle that stormwater runoff a few years ago before we were completely built out, and under those lesser rainfall conditions just isn't adequate to handle it under today's standards and in face of today's annual precipitation amounts.
Well, the US EPA is also writing new rules for non-point source pollution, which is you're going to almost perhaps have to start to treat the rainwater, which is you can almost see that coming down. So the more you can get to soak into the ground, the better off you are. Okay, why don't we start with Commissioner Thomas? Any thoughts on this?
This is a public hearing, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Jeez.
It's late and I'm tired. Okay, anybody from the public, please. Joe?
Yes. Again, just for the record, my name's Joseph Hernsick. I live at 224 East Naperville. Last night, as I was reading the agenda for the other item, I came across this item, and I thought I would do a comparison. When our area was subdivided, the lots were subdivided with a frontage of 60 feet and a rear FIP to FIP of 57 feet. So we are not a full 60-foot wide lot because of the angle of Naperville Road. I ran it out. I have a extremely small home. My home is 1,222 square feet. According to I'm using the statistics from I didn't measure, I just took the statistics from our property record card. My garage is 440 square feet. I have a garage that's in the rear of the property, so that means I have a large driveway, a long driveway, over 100 feet long. My driveway is 1,155 square feet, and that's a rough estimate. I come up that I am 50 feet above the allowable under a .35. And that was a place of hardship. Of course, looking at my property, now if I had a garage that was located in the front where I had a smaller, driveway and that was just a double wide driveway like a lot of houses, I would not exceed that. But I can make no additional improvements on my property as of if you put this in. Can't use the backyard, can't put a deck, can't put a patio. We don't have a deck, we don't have a patio. anything like that at the present time. And I'm assuming that the sidewalks were covered in there, in this, and the porch is covered in there. So essentially, what you will do is you will take that my house is either used as existing, which is extremely small and undersized, or you will be demolishing it.
How typical are you?
I don't know how typical I am. I'm
you're
sure that
typical at
Timmermans
all.
next door are probably in the same, would end up, I didn't do unrented property record card. You go down to the other end, they've got 11 or 12,000 square feet because of the angle of the road. We're impacted because of the .97 multiplier brought on by the angle of East Naperville Road, which I never thought of, when we first moved in here, and we have a 35-foot front setback. So I have a fair amount of square footage. I have probably, out of my lot, I have a fair amount of square footage that is there that absorbs the water. I mean, the only flooding problem we had is because the road work on the Black Hawk Drive cut off the sewer. That was the flood complaints that we had registered recently, was because the sewer they failed to reattach the sewer that ran along East Naperville Road from the middle of the block to the edge. Somehow it just got lost in the engineering, which surprised me that it was missed. But it's been addressed, and very effectively, by the village. The staff came out, worked up a plan, and found a way to connect it without tearing up the new road. And they did tear up Naperville, but Naperville's scheduled to be repaved because it's 30-plus years old. They did reconnect the sewer, but our biggest flooding problem was caused by the fact that the ditches stayed full and the fact that they need to be graded to go to the new sewer. That's it. I'm exactly why I figured it out. I'm under the new FRB. I have 50 square feet covered that would not be approved.
This won't work, this probably won't work for you then, so would you have to come in and get a variance, and I'm pretty sure we'd give you a variance for whatever you wanted.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm not going to cover the whole lot. I mean, whatever we might, I doubt I'd cover much more of the lot. I've been there 35 years, and this is the way it's sitting right now.
This is a generalization for we're trying to.
Yeah, I mean, have to come in, and I'd be put in a position of having to, whatever the cost of coming before this board and doing a variance. And I'm just pointing that issue out to you, and it was just something I noticed. I'm sure many of these other lots will be within the downtown area, particularly if people have a long side drive, paved side drive. I could tear that out and go back to gravel.
How long was that driveway?
It's about 100 feet from the.
Yeah, there it is.
It's about 115 feet from the road back, and believe me, I know it when I shovel the snow, particularly on the part between the sidewalk and the road that gets all the stuff that comes off the intersection dumps off into my neighbors and my driveway.
And then in that case, then it's case-by-case basis.
It has to be addressed, and that needs to be, designated that, you're going to have a case-by-case basis, and that's why I wanted to bring it to your attention tonight.
Well, and again, Mr. Chairman, that's what the variance process is for, but keep in mind, the village board has publicly expressed very strong feelings about this. They've expressed reservations about granting stormwater variances for lot coverage in the future because of the seriousness of the problems that we're experiencing. Staff is bringing this through the process at the express direction of the village board, who instructed us to do this because they have these concerns. You may see a decision by the village board, and I can't speak for the village board, their decision is their own to make, but they're going to be very reluctant, based on what they've said publicly, about granting lot coverage variances in the future.
One thing I might bring up, at Downers Grove Sanitary District, we're on quite an extensive program to remove infiltration and inflow into our sewer system. Normally, we run 8-9 million gallons a day. When we get a bad storm, we run 100 million gallons a day. So you see how much stormwater we get. We're tightening our pipes up, so that means that water is laying in your backyards and it's on your streets. So that's another reason why you're going to need some more of a permeable surface where this water can soak in instead of just flood everybody.
Oh, I know, you have to have permeable surface, and I thoroughly agree, and it's just like what we're talking about, building now out on these lots in this prior discussion, further construction within the village. A mistake was made in the late 70s when they basically did away with the farm exemption ordinance that protected farmland within DuPage County and let everybody build the highest and best filling of this county. And when I moved into this county, you had a farm at 63rd and Cass. You had Ides Tree Farm on, at 72nd and Cass. When we went to take my daughter in 1979 to the preschool at Elizabeth Ides School, we drove through a farm in the intersection of 75th and Manning Road. The children who had already left school at that point when she was being enrolled and we were viewing the preschool, at 75th and Manning Road, there was farmland on one side, his field was on one side of the road where Walmart is today, and the kids were diving into a pond where the retention pond is today, and there's a shopping center there. We've covered this county, and that's the problem. Now we have to figure out what to do with the water and how to redirect it. So I understand that, but I'm just saying, you know, not that I would care once I saw the house, you know, I could care less. Somebody bring a bulldozer and they can build a much bigger house, can build a much bigger square footage by eliminating the long driveway. That's all. It's just you're going to have a tear down. That's, you know, at that point, and that's what I would sell it as, is a tear down. And it's going to sit vacant for a while. I'd probably clear the lot before I even sold it. It'd be easier to sell as a vacant lot. And it'd also be less to maintain. If I tear down the house, I'm going to pay less tax on a lot than I'm going to pay on a house and a lot if I'm stuck with it in bad economic times. True. And I move to Florida or, you know, take a job with the mouse or something, or the nursing home or whatever. But that's the kind of thing, you know, we do need to look at what we're doing in these particular cases. And I understand the fact that they want to reduce it, but you might want to look at the R3 and see if there's some compromise to be worked out between 0.4 and 0.35. Because mine's, I don't think in any typical situation, particularly when you get south of Chicago Avenue and north of 55th Street. That was all I raised a point for. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public, please?
I only had intentions on dealing with the issue prior to this, but when I saw this, it struck a concern with me. Just in August, we put a pool in, and at that time, our plans included a deck. And while doing that, things came to be where there were issues within village code that required us to extensively dip into the budget for the pool, a little bit deeper than we had initially planned. So we had to push the deck off. Now, I do understand that a deck is only 50% coverage. I believe it's classified as 50% coverage. But a swimming pool is considered, there is no percentage there. And my problem is that right now, I think that with the deck we originally planned, we were going to be probably, I believe, right around 37 to 38% lot coverage, which now isn't a problem, but now if this goes through, we have an issue, and I now have a pool that is somewhat useless and unenjoyable to my family. Now, I understand that is not necessarily a hardship, but what I will say is this: in a rain storm, and the storm is storming over top of the pool, the water is going into the pool. It's not going into somebody's home. I deal with the flooding. I live in it. Trust me when I say that. And so therefore, I don't know that a pool necessarily is there a way that they can take like fence or, you know, decks and say, okay, 25% lot coverage, because theoretically the rainwater runs through the deck and onto the ground and it goes where it needs to be. And a swimming pool, it goes into the pool. And if kids are in there splashing, the water's going outside of the pool onto the ground and water's going where it should be. Therefore, I'm hoping that if they do approve reducing the lot coverage, which, I mean, if that's the only way to fix the problem, I respect that. I'm not an expert in that, but is there a way to adjust the percentages that certain types of structures are, you know, percentage covered? For instance, you know, a deck, and if it's a wooden deck, rather than having it considered 50%, unless there's cement block underneath it, you know, reduce it to, I mean, even something as small as 10 or 15%, because realistically, the water is still going into the ground. A swimming pool, rather than putting that at 100%, reduce that down even significantly, because with my pool in the summer, if it's raining, that water is going into the pool. I have a solar cover. There is no, now in the winter, on the other hand, all that is going to sit on top of the winter cover, and it'll then be either A, when it evaporates when it melts and turns into water, it will evaporate into the air, or when we remove the cover, it will fall onto the ground, the water will go onto the ground, it will go where it needs to be. So I'm just hoping that when you do what you guys need to do to protect us, and I understand that that is your job, that you also take into considerations that, there are people who have, I love my home. That's why I've put the money into it. But I also, from the day we moved into our house, I wanted my pool. We were in a position this year to do it, and the deck had to wait. And now I'm like shooting myself going, I got to run to the village right now and get that permit, otherwise I'm in trouble. So I'm just hoping that there's a little wiggle room in there to kind of accommodate things like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps these kinds of items can be addressed in the future, but I mean, that doesn't pertain to this. Lot coverage, we can always adjust that. Yes, sir.
David Svitek, I'll sign here in just a moment. This village has done...
Can you sign in, sir?
Over the past several years, this village has done several studies, from parking surveys to the current stormwater survey. With this flooding being a problem and lot coverage coming before us today, is there any particular study that we can look at that says that 35% is actually the right number, as opposed to, say, 30%? Or a higher number?
I'm not aware of any such study.
Well, right now, we're at 40%, where it's being proposed to 35. Yeah, reduced down to 35.
So your question is how they arrived at that number?
I'd like to know how they arrived at that number. I mean, instead of saying, well, we got a flooding problem, we're at 40%, well, let's drop it by 5%. That sounds like a good number. To me, that sounds like pulling a number out of a hat.
Yeah.
But in reality, what kind of studies are out there that can actually help determine the right number here?
Well, here, let me read to you what staff has written to us. The reduction to 35% would allow for coverage of up to 2,730 feet, which would be comparable to the type of development occurring on single-family lots in Clarendon Hills or the R4 district in Downers Grove in terms of home size. Lot coverage in Lyle is nearly identical to this amendment proposal. The communities of Woodridge, Hinsdale, and Darien permit greater lot coverage, in most cases up to 50%.
I did try to find on the internet, if there was any studies out there, and really I didn't find anything. Basically, all I found was lot coverage. The highest lot coverage I saw out there on the internet was 56%. And on the low end, it's kind of surprised me at the beginning, was a lot coverage of 5%. But on that particular lot coverage, the minimum size lot had to be 20 acres. But
yeah, but there's, from what I'm gathering, you're comparing apples to oranges. Here we are as a relatively built-up community. All we've got is infill that we can deal with. And here you're saying 5% lot coverage on farmland, so it's a tremendous difference.
I think the simple premise is that the village currently allows a 40% lot coverage. If you reduce it to 35%, it's going to create more green space less impact on stormwater runoff. So it's kind of just a common sense thing. You're right, it was in a way pulled out of a hat, but it was also, how can you create more green space with future development and still have a reasonable number that will allow for smart, reasonable development? And I think that's how it was kind of.
And get it close
arrived
to
at.
the neighboring communities, their numbers that they're at.
I have no problem with that, but I think there should be some more reasoning behind that number. Also, I did read that some other communities, when it comes to lot coverage, when you have a deck or coverage that's so many feet off the ground, that it's not included in the lot coverage. That swimming pools aren't included in the lot coverage. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Can I just ask one question?
Please, Joe.
Is there an allowance of staff?
Joe,
Yes,
come up to the
sorry, yeah.
microphone,
Oh, I
please.
might be listening. Wondering where I am. Is there an allowance in the, for permeable surfacing in the ordinance?
Not currently. That is under
So I
study
can't
by-
jack out my concrete driveway and replace it with a permeable brick driveway?
You could,
you
but
may,
it would be
but you-
counted as 100%.
It would be counted as 100%. So I think that's something that the board, that needs to be addressed in the ordinance, and this is a comment again to staff.
Well, Joe, that's something that would have to be addressed in the county ordinance, because right now they do not allow
It's the
credit.
county
for that.
ordinance.
We're what we call a partial waiver community, and we're
Okay.
bound to enforce their standards.
And the county ordinance would be found on the county website? So I
yes.
can go read it, because I've found many times that, I like to read the ordinances for myself, because I have found that discrepancies in interpretations more than once in the past.
Now
So I'd
that-
like to read that.
That matter is under study and consideration by the county. We can tell you that. They have not reached a conclusion. They have not translated that into ordinance form. The long-term concern is that a permeable surface works well now. How will it function in 25 years after oil and soot
Sure.
and dirt clogs it up? Have you created a monster then by giving credit and allowing that to be what is impermeable, a semi-permeable surface now, which could become impermeable in the future? There are no longitudinal studies which.
Okay.
try to-
I understand that, sure. I imagine that is the case also. It's just a matter, that essentially, that, probably they're not going to grant waivers, because they're going to have to do, it seems to be the feeling that I'm hearing here, and that would mean that basically that would landlock me from doing any further improvement that might require a paved surface. Is there any surfacing that is not considered a pavement?
Can you say
Something
that
I can put down, that I can put a table down on, that I'm not sitting in the mud?
again? Yeah, not according to the ordinance as it's written today.
Unfortunately not.
Grass driveway anymore either.
Okay, so essentially, it's demolish and rebuild. You bring me to that point, if I wanted to do anything further with that property. And it dictates the improvements that I make to the property in the future. And do I just
Joe,
move somewhere?
That's where the variance will come in also, though.
But he's saying that there's a.
I'm not going to attempt to speak for the
can't.
board,
Yeah,
but
but-
what I can tell you is that the village board has held many public hearings with angry residents in this room contending, we've got a serious problem. The insinuation is, how dare you grant any more, stormwater variances when my basement is flooding? That's a very powerful and a very emotional argument for a citizen to make, and it's a lot of pressure on our elected officials when the room is filled with angry people who have experienced a flooding incident.
So you've got a property that has no detention, like the Jewel Osco property at Cass and Ogden has minimal detention on property.
That's not
Okay,
true at all.
but you're
That's not true
going
at all.
off on the other
I mean,
items
can we
now.
go back and sunset the other parking and make
No,
them
the
reimprove
Jewel
it?
Osco has an underground stormwater detention system that stores.
It's on the west side. You can see the
Yeah.
top of it exposed.
How
in
about on
berm
the
area.
eastern part of that property? Is
That
there?
property
Okay,
is-
but, hey,
We're deviating from what
Sorry,
we're
I just
talking
was
about.
asking, just curious. I'll send you an email and ask you all the questions about properties that have that.
Is there anybody else that will speak on this? Please, if you would.
I feel like I should sit down and be quiet. Things were good for me earlier, and I don't want to mess them up. But I'm curious because the reduction from 40% to 35%, I'm absolutely certain that my property right now, with all the things that are on it, would be over. And if I needed to adjust things in my backyard, because right now I don't like the way that my deck and my patio are in my backyard, and I actually wanted to improve them. And based on this, I don't think I'd be able to touch them because I'm already over, which means I just have to hold my hands up and say, oh, well, I'm stuck with it. Is that what I'm hearing? Am I really?
You can ask for a variance. Now, you have no assurance when you ask for a variance, and you have to pay for that privilege. But again, this is the village officials whose responsibility it is to respond to the people to a very big problem that we
And
have.
I totally understand the flooding because my front yard has flooded for the last year and a half because of the storm drain issue. And it's funny because they built the house next door and magically my flooding in my front yard went away, which made me realize that it wasn't my house that was causing the flooding, and it wasn't just the rain. They came in and they put in some more plumbing, and they actually relieved some of that issue. So it might not be so much that we need to make the property, what they can put on it, smaller, but that we really need to look at the plumbing in our village and figure out how can we actually ease the plumbing and put in a better plumbing system, because I know it's been here for a very long time, and it's time for us to be updated. We're a very small village, but it's time for us to update some of that stuff and fix it the right way as opposed to affecting the residents and the growth of our community, because we all know that where my house is, there was intended to be a bunch of new houses that were built. Removing the older houses, bringing in new houses, getting the village up to what the surrounding area is, what Downers Grove looks like, what Lyle looks like, what Darien is looking like right now, what Hinsdale is looking like, getting our village to grow so that it becomes and looks as prosperous as the things that are around it. And by shrinking that, I know we're thinking that we're going to be making ours just as, as big as Downers Grove, so they're at 2,700 square feet. But one of the reasons that the builders built the house that I'm in now was because of some of the things that Westmont offered that the other villages didn't. And I'd hate to see that removed and to not be able to have other builders come into the area where there are vacant lots still on my block. That haven't been picked up. And we got lucky that the house next to us was picked up because it was vacant and apparently had some dead guy sitting in it, and we didn't even know about it. Yes, very fun. But it'd be nice to see that the rest of the lots actually get built upon and that the sewage is actually fixed, not Band-Aided. And I think that reducing it to 35%, yes, I love the greenery, but reducing it is not fixing the problem, it's Band-Aiding the problem. And I really think that the committee should help the board figure out how to fix the problem as opposed to putting Band-Aids on it.
I like troublemakers like her.
Not a troublemaker.
Unfortunately, when you talk about sewage, the village of Westmont has no control over sewage whatsoever.
Then we need to go fuss
They are
at the
separate
county.
taxing bodies. The east side of Cass Avenue is served by Flag Creek.
Oh, wow.
The west side of Cass Avenue is served by Downers Grove Sanitary District.
Absolutely nothing
Village of
the
Westmont
village
has
can do for it.
Nothing whatsoever. Just stormwater, just stormwater.
And I want my taxes to go up, okay?
No, I don't want my taxes to go up either.
I want to see new businesses come in, no taxes on stamp.
So there's still no way to talk to Downers Grove and the others. There has to be a way to fix it. That's just my thing. There's a way to fix, this comes from me running businesses. I don't believe that anything is impossible. Everything is possible. You have to be willing to think outside of the box and find a way to make the impossible possible. And with that, I have grown several businesses and done things that people didn't think that I'd be able to do, simply because I'm always thinking, okay, roadblock here, how do I turn? Who do I need to ask? Where do I need to go? And how do I make everybody happy? Because everything is about win-win. You don't want anybody losing, you want everybody to win. And if it's not win-win here, with property values going down the way that they are, we need to do anything and everything we can to make sure that we're bringing people into our village and that we're keeping those that are here, here. Because if they can't put the addition onto their house here, don't believe that they won't sell it and go somewhere else. And now we've got a house that's vacant.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else from the public who will speak on this? Okay, we're going to close the public comment. Let's have an open forum. Any commissioner, just speak, say what you think.
Too tired.
While I respect the opinion of the trustees and those who have brought this forward, I feel that 40% is right. I just think that's the number that I've looked at the charts, and there's some below it, there's some above it, there's some right at it, and I think it increases and creates a hardship for a large chunk of our community, a large chunk of it, and I'm not sure that's the right way.
Okay, I'm going to put my 2 cents worth in here. I want to know if the staff has looked at the number of homes in the central part of the community which will be affected, and find out what is the average lot coverage currently in those areas. That's where the flooding seems to be. It's more in the central part of the community, not in where the newer homes have been built in subdivisions. I'm talking about south end of town, north end of town, where there's new newer, the old homes that were built in the 20s through the, say, 50s. Those are the ones that have the smaller lots. And what is the typical lot coverage?
I don't believe we have any data assembled in that regard, Commissioner. The comprehensive stormwater study that was done by Christopher Burke is very interesting reading and highlights several different areas throughout the village, not just the central area of the village where stormwater flooding problems are existent currently. I think the village board, in their desire to come to grips, temporarily at least, with the severe flooding issues that have been voiced by a large number of village residents, said, we have to do something. We have to do something quickly. And it was with that in mind that they directed staff to bring this forward.
Well, I have a concern. I mean, we're a recommending body. We will make a recommendation, but there are parts of the community that have larger lots. They don't have flooding issues, and their stormwater doesn't necessarily drain into those areas that do have the flooding issues. So why should they be, penalized when they do have a large enough lot and they do have enough green space for the water to run off on? So maybe there might be I don't know if you can do this, a two-tier type, define a particular area where you have a restriction of 35%, but I still don't agree with it, but and then have the other at 40. Just a thought, because these people that own the homes that are in those areas that tend to flood, there's an issue there, but I feel for them, and I feel that they should be able to, expand their home and live in their home that they bought or maybe lived in it for years, and now all of a sudden, they have that opportunity to expand the home, and now they're restricted. Yes, they will have that opportunity come in front of us for variance, but
when you really think about the impact that this is going to have on our flooding is nominal, if at all existent. How much building is going on? How many room additions are we seeing coming in here? One every 3 months? So as to it, It's paying lip service to a problem, but it's not really, really think about it. What's going on in building and in construction right now? If you're looking for a quick answer to a long-term, deep problem, this is a Band-Aid, to say the least.
And here's my opinion is, you go down to 35, and you're gonna give out variances, or you stay at 40 and hold the line, and don't give any. And say, we're gonna stick with 40, and be comprehensive about it, and say, this is what we're gonna do. If you drop it to 35, and you're gonna have a ton of people coming through, trying to get to where they want, where what's reasonable. I mean, like you said, it's not gonna impact, like, we haven't seen a lot going through. So you're right, it's not gonna impact a lot of people right away, or a lot of area. I think you'd impact more area by taking up some of the surfaces that aren't being used, some of the lots that aren't, are abandoned or whatever.
Is a swimming pool figure 100%?
Yes. The reason for that, Mr. Chairman, is what do you do in the event you have a 50 or 100-year storm? What happens to that swimming pool? I think that from an engineering perspective, our village planning engineer or public works director could explain why that is an issue.
And the patio is 50%?
A patio is 100% if it's concrete or asphalt.
If it's concrete, yeah, but I'm sorry, I meant deck.
A deck.
I spoke
If there's spacing in between the deck and there's a there's a permeable surface below, you don't put,
Gravel or
the
whatever.
visqueen that seals off the ground, then we reduce that from 100 to 50% about, 4 years ago, Shannon?
Yeah, all right.
See what the wizard's got to say.
I said it already.
That's it?
I think it should stay at 40%.
Any further conversation? Okay. I would entertain a motion to recommend approval to the Board of Trustees that we amend Appendix A, Section 6.04, Paragraph D of the Westmont Zoning Code to reduce maximum allowable lot coverage from 40% to 35% in all single-family zoning districts.
So moved.
Second.
That's motion by Commissioner Thomas, seconded by Commissioner Anton. Question on the motion, roll call, please.
Commissioner Fidesco?
No.
Commissioner Van Buren votes no. Commissioner Pill?
No?
Commissioner Anton?
No.
Commissioner Thomas?
No.
Commissioner Fleet?
No.
And Chairman Richard?
No. Any further commissioners, any business come before the board?
We do have one item that we'd like to make just as an announcement to the commission, Mr. Chairman, if we could. We'd like to announce that very recently our village planner, Shannon Malik, has undergone a title change. She will now be known as the Assistant Economic Development Director / Village Planner.
Okay.
Right now.
Get a new book door.
And I knew her when.
She's taking your office, right?
What's that?
Taking over your office?
Yes.
Kids grow up so fast.
Wow.
I would entertain motion to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Motion by Commissioner Fleet, seconded by Commissioner Anton. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.